Oh, here we go. Hello, hello, welcome. Hello, welcome. Hello, hi, hi, hi. I'm just going to sign on to Instagram. Hopefully, we're all live on the YouTube. Welcome. Happy Wednesday. Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Happy Balanced Wellness Wednesday with Beth. If you are joining me on Instagram, if you could just let me know that I am coming through and that my audio is working. And if you're joining me on YouTube, if you could let me know. Hello, hi, welcome. Hello. Happy Wednesday. If you could just let me know that you can hear me okay on Instagram. We're going to dive right in. I'm so excited. If you are joining me on Instagram and you want to see any of the visual slides that I'll be providing as part of tonight's live broadcast, you can join me over on YouTube. Fix your ear. Oh, thanks, Mark. Now I have to turn on my do not disturb. Welcome. We're going to talk tonight all about chaotic eating, and we have a chaotic start to our broadcast, so that's wonderful. If you're catching me on the YouTube replay later in the future, just know that there are chapters below. You can jump ahead, skip around, avoid this awkward intro and all the welcomes of me making sure that everyone can hear me. Hello, Amanda. Hello, JBX, and Use of Weapons, and Jesse and Carrie and everyone over on YouTube. Again, if you're on Instagram, please head over to YouTube to join us. You can see the slides. You can see my full setup that I'll be using tonight. And I just find the engagement and the conversation is really wonderful over there. Just a little bit easier for us to keep up with. Wonderful. Hello, Willa. I'm so glad you're here. If you are new here, welcome. My name is Beth. I am a certified functional nutritionist. I am certified in nutritional psychology. I am completing my certification to be a CPT through NASM. I am a restorative wellness practitioner at level 3. I do all sorts of things, but essentially what I do is I help my clients navigate mindset and behavior changes with compassion, with grace, and with ease. Welcome to Balanced Wellness Wednesdays with Beth, and this is a weekly series where we're going to connect, learn, grow, and just dive into all things nutrition, fitness, habit change, mindset, mindfulness. And if you haven't been here before, the whole goal is every week we're exploring new, different topics, and you'll have the opportunity to share with me, with each other, to ask questions, to pick my brain. And if you didn't see the title of tonight's episode, it's all about breaking free from chaotic eating and nourishing your body with consistency instead. So I'm really excited to dive in. If you joined us in the last couple of weeks, I know we took last week off because I was supposed to get my husband from the airport. If you joined me 2 weeks ago and I shared that tool about how to discover if products that you're picking up at the store or things being marketed as high protein are in fact high protein, I'd love to hear from any of you if you got a chance to experiment and use that tool in your kitchen, in the grocery store. I've already heard from a few folks that I work with one-on-one that they found it to be really, really helpful. Anybody learn anything about something that they didn't know before, or any shockers when you were using that high protein tool? I just thought it would be fun before we dive into tonight's content to just hear if anybody got a chance to play around with that and learn anything new. And again, as we talk about chaotic eating tonight, I'm also excited to hear from all of you if this is something you are currently experiencing or maybe have in the past or you struggle with from time to time. And maybe you didn't know that there's really an opportunity to identify what we call chaotic eating and to also make changes if it's something that's impacting your ability to reach your goals and achieve your goals. So let's just dive right in. Maybe we got a quiet group tonight, but I'd love to hear if you have anything to share. And again, if you're joining me on Instagram and you want to pop over to the YouTube, I've got lots of pretty slides and things to make the learning a little bit more visual, which I am a big fan of. And you can find a link to that in my profile. So let's dive in to chaotic eating. So I'd love to hear, besides maybe hearing me speak about it recently on Instagram and my stories, have you ever heard the term chaotic eating before? Is this something that you've ever identified with, or maybe even just heard used in passing? So the idea of tonight's conversation is to help you to understand when you are experiencing and when chaotic eating patterns might be impacting your ability to be consistent. Mark said, I use the protein gimmick to help me pick a best option for energy bars to take on my Pacific Northwest trip. I love that. And you did a good job. I was so proud of the picks that you made for your travels. That's so awesome. JBX said, I had practically zero protein in my diet. You've helped me be able to make more informed, successful decisions. Awesome. I love that. I'm so excited. I'm excited to hear how you feel with more time and energy spent on getting in more protein. Jesse said, not yet, or no, excuse me. Amanda said, never heard the term, but absolutely recognized it when you described it. JBX said, I totally identify with this. So let's talk a little bit about what this means. Does anybody already know that they're a chaotic eater as we talk about this? Has anybody been like, okay, this is me? Besides, I know JBX, you're saying that this is definitely you. So at its core, chaotic eating is essentially categorized by irregular and unpredictable eating habits. So it's kind of that feeling of not having a consistent rhythm when it comes to nourishing your body. So you might find yourself, I would say this one's really common, you might find yourself skipping meals. Or maybe it's just succumbing to like emotional eating and just ignoring your body's physical hunger cues. Maybe it's experiencing extreme inconsistent meal timings. That's one I see very frequently. So why is it that I talk about this? Well, if you are familiar with my work at all, I'll often talk about signs that you're undernourished or not eating enough for your body and all of the ways that that can impact your life, from your energy levels to your moods, your abilities to your ability to focus, your motivation. Obviously, broad scope, it's, our muscle mass and our immune function and our hormone health and all of these other things that impact kind of our overall vitality. So you often hear me talk about undereating and some of the problems that we experience when we're undernourished. And I certainly, in my practice, when I work with one-on-one folks, I certainly work with my fair share of clients who are undernourished and then as a result experience some of that metabolic adaptation where their body just doesn't really function the way it should. Maybe they struggle to lose weight or gain body muscle or lean muscle, So I certainly work with those folks, but I would say more often I see this pattern that is kind of a combination of undereating and overeating that I call chaotic eating. And this is what leads to folks feeling like they're doing so much right. I eat so good, I eat clean, I'm doing so much right, but they're still not seeing the results. And again, the work I do isn't just about body composition and fat loss. I'm talking about all aspects of our health. So I'd love to go through a list of common habits that we see with chaotic eaters, and I'd love to see if any of these sound familiar in your current eating patterns. So I have to switch around here. Excuse me. Still getting used to using the slideshow. Okay, so this is one I hear really frequently. I often skip breakfast, usually because I'm rushing out of the house and I don't have easy grab and go options. So I'd love to hear if maybe some of these as I go through them are things that you've experienced yourself in this journey. There we go. Slides. If you are joining me on Instagram, I have slides that go along with what I'm teaching. So if you're wondering what I'm doing, there's some visual, because I'm a big fan of, I'm a visual learner myself. I love seeing what someone's talking about. I find that I'm able to take it in and learn it and withhold it. So hopefully if you are on Instagram, you pop over to YouTube where you can see that. Work takes all of my attention and my focus during the day, and eating often ends up on the back burner. If that's something that you find yourself saying or experiencing, you may be experiencing some chaotic eating patterns. There are days, why are my slides not working? Of course, when I tested this, it was working so well. There are days when I go without eating anything at all when I'm at work. How many of you have had those days? I'm already seeing me and yes and totally me over on YouTube. There's days when I just all of a sudden go, oh my gosh, it's 2:00 and I haven't eaten. If that sounds like you might be experiencing some chaotic eating patterns. Even though I eat frequently, I still battle with constant food cravings. So maybe you're eating your meals, and we're going to talk about in a little bit why this might be, but maybe you find you're eating frequently throughout the day. You're picking, you're grazing, you're snacking, but you still experience a lot of food cravings. Maybe it's that you sometimes use food as a reward or punishment. Maybe it's associating it with my feelings of accomplishment or guilt, right? So if this is something you find yourself saying yes to, I sometimes use food as a reward or punishment. I associate it with my feelings of accomplishment or guilt. You might be experiencing some form of chaotic eating. Maybe it's I grab random snacks at foods at work. So wherever, on people's desks in the break room, on someone's snack drawer that you know is there. You walk by, you grab the foods whenever you can, you eat, you don't even think about it, you're on the go. And it's mostly because you're uncertain if you're going to have time to eat later on. So you see the food and you eat the food. Maybe it's that you tend to eat very quickly or while you're distracted, and it's not giving you enough time to actually register when you're full, when you're satisfied, when you've had enough food. Maybe that sounds like something that you experience, even if you're not consciously doing it. Maybe it's just a byproduct of, again, eating on the go or not taking time to sit and eat mindfully. If you can say, I frequently eat in response to emotions like stress or anxiety or boredom or sadness without paying any attention to my body's actual hunger signals. So if you experience this, you might be a chaotic eater. Emotional eating isn't inherently bad. This is something that we talk about in depth in all of my coaching programs and especially in the one-on-one work that I do. Emotional eating works. We wouldn't do it if it didn't work. If it's our only tool or if it's something that we utilize day in and day out to be able to cope with hard emotions or to escape hard emotions or to navigate things that are challenging, then it may be something we want to consider changing. I'm getting folks saying often, Jesse said, my problem is blood sugar is often going low. Yeah, we're going to talk about that a lot tonight and why that is such a problem and why some of that low blood sugar may be a result of chaotic eating. Maybe it's when I finally get home from work, it has been so long since my last meal, I find myself indulging in high calorie dense foods. Maybe snacking starts the moment I step in the door and it doesn't stop until I've had dinner. So something I'll often see are individuals who are cooking dinner and they are eating as they're prepping dinner and as they're cooking dinner and then dinner comes and they're eating dinner and they're still not satiated. So if you walk in the door and it feels like, oh my gosh, it's been so long since my last meal and you feel like you don't have control, this could be a result of chaotic eating. Sometimes I get so caught up in everything that I forget to eat. Again, I hear this a lot with my busy parents, with people who have full-time jobs that really take a lot out of them. This can be an example of chaotic eating, especially depending on what comes as a result of forgetting to eat. There are moments when I'm hungry, but there is nothing available for me to eat, and I don't have time to go search something out, so maybe I just skip it altogether. Does this sound like you? Is this something that you find yourself experiencing? Like, oh, I'm hungry. I know I need to eat, but there's nothing easy. I don't have anything prepared. So I'm just and no time. I'm on the go. I'm on to my next project, on to my next thing. So I'm skipping it. And then just a couple more examples of how chaotic eating can show up. I tend to eat most of my food later in the day. Again, I kind of used this example already, but I become ravenous while I'm cooking dinner and I cannot wait until dinner's done cooking. So I just start snacking while I'm cooking dinner. And maybe it's even kind of, again, I don't really even feel satisfied until well into the end of the day. So there's no, Mark said, I feel like your roommate may have inspired this topic. It's so funny because my sister saw my stories and she said, hey, are you using our conversations to create content? I'm like, I'd love to tell you all that you're so special, each and every one of you. And some of you do inspire content, but I'd love to tell you that this is because just one of you was so special in my life. I couldn't help it, but to create content for you. But the fact of the matter is this is something I hear incredibly frequently. I hear it all the dang time from all types of people. My day often consists of grazing on snacky foods without having any proper balanced meals. Again, this is one I hear very frequently. Lots of just like nibbles, bites, snacks, things at your desk or whatever. This is a big one that I see, especially in the work that I do and the individuals who I work with, is I've noticed I can stick to a clean eating routine or a diet on all the weekdays, but then I find myself losing control on the weekends. And why I wanted to use this example is that I think a lot of times we think of this chaotic eating on a 24-hour cycle. Like I wake up, maybe I skip breakfast, I have a coffee, the coffee sort of impacts my appetite, lowers my appetite, then suddenly it's 3 o'clock and I realized I haven't eaten. Yes, that's chaotic eating, but I also see it kind of on the macro on the macro. So on the micro and on the macro, it's like week to week, they go, I'm going to go so hard. I'm going to diet. I'm going to eat clean. I'm going to be so good Monday through Friday, and Saturday comes and you feel like you have no self-control. You feel like all bets are off. You feel so restricted. Everything feels so off limits during the week that the weekend comes and suddenly it doesn't seem to matter. This is often when I'll see folks being like, it's the weekend, it's a cheat day. And what's happening is there's sort of this surrender to foods you see as being off limits Monday through Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday come and suddenly you feel like you can't control yourself. Sometimes it's even like strict resets or restrictive diets or programs for a month only to revert to old habits that are really not supportive or healthy for you after. And again, it's kind of this like 30-day cycle, right? That's one I hear very frequently, very frequently. Which here's the example right here. I find myself trapped in cycles of extreme restriction for weeks or even months. And then the rebound is like this total free-for-all, right? So again, this can also be a version of chaotic eating. There's not a whole lot of consistency when we're bouncing around, right? So if you recognize any of these habits, or many of them especially, you may be a chaotic eater and you might be experiencing what we call chaotic eating patterns. So I noticed in the YouTube chat, a lot of you were sharing that sounds like me, or I've experienced this. If you're over on Instagram, feel free to share if any of this sounds like you, or bounce over and join us over on YouTube. Again, if this is you, let's discuss why this approach isn't effective and why I'm talking about it at all, why I think it's an important conversation, why it's a good opportunity for us to have this conversation tonight, and just explore some of the ways you can make positive changes. Before I continue, any questions about some things that you experience that maybe you consider, or as you're hearing me talk about this, are worried might be chaotic eating patterns, feel free to use the chat. I'd be happy to kind of discuss if you're curious about anything, or just maybe if you're noticing something as we're talking about this that kind of follows that same pattern of being like up, down, and really no consistency, regularity, routines, schedules, frequency of meals, etc. So here's the thing. It's that consistency as a whole isn't just this catchy term, right? I know we talk about it a lot in the world of fitness and nutrition and health habits and behavior change. It's not just this catchy term, it's not just this trendy thing, and we share it for really important reasons. Mostly it's because it's, I think, a really powerful ally and just a really important tool for nurturing our overall well-being, whatever our goals are. But doing this work as long as I have, I think it is absolutely impossible to expect that you're going to achieve your health goals without some amount of consistency, whatever they are. If your goal is to maybe let go of dieting and to be more of an intuitive eater and to eat more intentionally and let go of tracking, you're not going to do that without some amount of consistency in whatever habits are going to support you in that. Maybe you have goals of losing body fat or losing weight. Maybe you're trying to gain weight or gain strength in the gym. Maybe it's improving your digestion, supporting blood sugar balance. I know a handful of you have shared that you're struggling with blood sugar balance. None of these are going to happen with any amount of sustainability and any amount of ease if there isn't consistency. So this is where it's important to kind of envision our body as this like finely tuned instrument that essentially thrives in equilibrium. It thrives when everything's in harmony. So when we establish consistent eating habits, this is what's providing our body with a reliable stream of nourishment. It's kind of creating and evoking for our body this sense of peace and reliability. When you tell your body, hey, I'm going to feed you and you can expect it's going to happen again and again, there is this peace. There's this nervous system regulation. There's this calm. There's this trust. There's this incredible communication that starts to happen. And this ability to tune in becomes easier and easier as we kind of form this bond of trust between us and our bodies. That's all a result of consistency. And it's also again, fostering steady energy supply. It's optimizing our metabolism. It's reducing total unnecessary stress on our nervous system. I don't think people realize fasting for some people is a great tool. And if it's working for you and you feel mother effing great, I love that for you. But it is not for everyone. For a lot of folks who struggle with blood sugar balance, going extended gaps without food or skipping meals will lead to low blood sugar. And low blood sugar will trigger stress hormones, and potentially over time, this can cause the breakdown of lean tissue such as muscle, so our body can get the adequate fuel and energy that it needs. So consistency in nutrition is maintaining our stable blood sugars, right? Stable blood sugar levels, right? I think that's pretty easy for most people to understand. Although it's really interesting how often people are fearful of blood sugar as this thing they need to avoid. Do I need a continuous glucose monitor so I can see when my blood sugar spikes? But I think we're often forgetting that just as catastrophic and just as stressful to the body is going without food and experiencing these very, very low blood sugar and energy crashes, if you will. So all of this idea, this practice of eating more consistently, eating with some amount of regularity, all of this is kind of offsetting what happens with that erratic and chaotic eating, those crashes and those spikes. We're mitigating significant stress on our body. So we want to think about it like we're providing our body with this important slow burning fuel. We're sustaining energy throughout our day when we're feeding our body. A regular eating rhythm, whatever that is for you, again, there's a lot of variations here. There's a spectrum. I'm not saying everybody has to eat 5 small meals a day or 3 large meals a day. And not everybody needs to eat every 3 hours. And some people may go better with 5 to 6. There's not any one right way to do this, but it is important, no matter who you are and what you're going through, that you're providing your body with sustainable energy throughout your day. And this is what a regular eating rhythm does. And it helps a more well-functioning metabolism. And it's essentially a linchpin for weight management, if that is something you're working on, and just our overall vitality. So as I already touched on, I'd love to hear in the YouTube chat or on Instagram, for those of you who are joining me there, if you have found a mealtime frequency that works for you. Are you someone who eats smaller, more frequent meals, and so maybe you're eating every 2, 3, 4 hours? Or do you notice that you're someone who thrives larger, maybe less frequent meals, but still with some amount of sort of frequency? I think what's important is to understand when we're talking about consistency, this doesn't translate to consuming identical foods in the same amounts every day at the same time. If that works for you, again, I love that. I'm not that person. I don't work like that. Because we're dynamic beings, our needs are going to always ever evolve. So our circumstances are going to change. And that means, and some of you may notice this in your own daily lives, that your hunger levels change. And that's part of being a human, and it's totally normal. Because our bodies are always adapting to factors like activity levels, I work out differently every day. Yesterday, I got a ton of steps. My hunger was increased because of it. Today, I did less steps, but I lifted weights. Very different hunger. Same with stress, environmental influences, hormonal changes. So when we embrace consistency with our eating, it's also knowing that there's fluctuations and that our ability to respond thoughtfully is all part of this process. So consistency, if any of you have ever worked with me in any form or have followed anything that I teach, it's important to remember that consistency does not require perfection. So your consistency might look different than mine, different than others who are on this broadcast. And as I said, some thrive with smaller meals, some thrive with larger, more less frequent meals. So let's talk about some of the problems that happen when we are experiencing undernourishment and chaotic eating and sort of the impact of these sort of irregular habits. Again, if you have any questions as we're going through this, please feel free to use the chat box in either place. But I think it's important to understand why we talk about this and that ripple effect. When we're skipping meals, when we're grazing all day without balanced nutrition, when we're experiencing any sort of inconsistent eating habits, we risk depriving our bodies of essential nutrients. And this can leave us feeling fatigued, irritable, lacking the vitality we need to thrive. It can impact our moods. How many of you have gotten like crabby at the end of the day when you finally see your partner or your kids and it feels like you can't explain why? And you maybe look back at the day and you've hardly eaten. So it's probably hunger. Again, moods, hormones, even our thyroid health. And over time, I'm sure a lot of you are going to express this at some point in this conversation tonight. Low hunger and appetite dropping is often something that a lot of individuals experience when they're just inconsistent with their eating. I want to pause for a moment and tell you that if you're unsure, if you're undernourished, if you're unsure if you're actually as a whole eating chaotically and as a result undereating, I do have a free ebook. It is linked up in my Instagram profile as well as in the show notes of this YouTube video, the caption underneath. I have a free ebook called Are You Eating Enough? And this ebook goes really in depth about how to know if you are in fact undernourished and undereating. It offers insight into how to determine how much is right for you, and then the steps you can take to begin some of that metabolic restoration work and to just support your body in being more nourished. And it even comes with like a 5-day email support series. So I encourage you, if this is something you are concerned that you're dealing with or are aware that you're dealing with, to check that resource out. It's really action-packed, but also information-packed for you. So let's talk about the undernourishment, and overeating connection that is very prevalent with a lot of the folks I see. When undernourishment is present, it lays the groundwork for overeating. This is probably one of the most common things that I see in my practice. I see it all the time in new clients. Our bodies are incredibly intelligent and they are incredibly resilient. And in the absence of consistent nourishment, they respond with intense hunger signals. And I mean, how many of you have experienced this where you undereat all day and you don't just come home and say, oh, like I'm going to eat a balanced meal and like chicken and veggies and rice and or potatoes and spinach, whatever. Like it feels like irrational cravings, right? It feels like uncontrollable, irrational cravings. And it's often for quick, high energy, high calorie foods, simple carbs, sugars, those calorie dense, fatty, salty options, right? Like your brain and our body, they're so smart. They just want more fuel. And so what happens is there's this overcompensation of sorts. You undereat, your body says, hey, I don't like that. I need fuel. Can you give it to me? And can you give me the good stuff? And can you give me the fast stuff? So there's this overcompensation where we consume often way more than what our bodies truly need in this overcorrection. And so again, I think this is a really important part of this cycle of chaotic eating, to acknowledge and to start to maybe break down the triggers of and for, and also to implement some amount of consistency. Brian shared, so I started doing intermittent fasting, and I'll be honest, I did it for weight loss, but it was amazing how my stomach shrank and how much I actually felt satisfied after my meals, not overeating. Good. I'm so glad that you found something that works for you. That's great. Like I said, everybody's different. And for some individuals, if that works for you, whatever your goals are, there's no wrong reason to implement and make behavior and habit changes in your nutrition. That's what body autonomy is about. I think if you found something that works for you and it's keeping you satisfied, I think that's great. I don't always see that with everybody, but I know for some people it's a really great tool. So thanks for sharing that with us, Brian. So the cycle of chaotic eating, this erratic eating, it can also impact our self-control and our perception of our self-control. And that's another big reason why I love to talk about this. This cycle kind of between where we're swinging between restriction and then sort of overindulgence as that overcorrection, it often disrupts our body's natural ability to regulate hunger and to regulate fullness. And something that I think is really important to understand is that if you're struggling with this, it is really hard to expect yourself to honor your fullness cues when you are constantly ignoring your hunger cues. Constantly, right? So hunger isn't just a grumbly tummy and stomach pangs. Hunger is all different sorts of symptoms and signs from your body that it's time for more fuel. If you're consistently ignoring it, pushing past, drinking coffee, chewing gum, and not honoring your hunger signals, it's going to be really, really hard for you to start to tune into your fullness signals. this roller coaster starts to take away our sense of self-control, our control with food. It takes away our self-confidence and our self-trust. And then, like I said, I think a lot of these extreme swings, what I really see in my clients who come to me dealing with this stuff, it's a lack of self-compassion and this demoralization. Like people start to moralize their ability to have control with food or their beliefs in themselves because they have this story, right, that they can't do it. And all that's happening is this physiological response to undernourishment throughout the day. A lack of control, I often see a lack of self-control more as a lack of self-awareness and mindfulness. And we have to acknowledge that it's incredibly hard and downright impossible to expect ourselves to practice mindfulness if we are so beyond hungry that we feel crazed. So go back to some of those examples that I shared of like coming home from work after skipping food all day and starting to cook for the kids or for yourself and your partner and sort of rummaging through the counter or the cabinets and eating snacks while you're cooking and feeling completely out of control. It's really hard to pause and be mindful and to have self-awareness when your blood sugar is low and your body is saying, just give me fast fuel. JBX said, I'd love to hear more about coffee's effect on the routine. I confess it's my go-to throughout the day. You know, coffee provides a stimulation, but coffee does not provide energy. It doesn't have calories. It is not providing energy to your cells. So it's also an appetite suppressor. So what can happen is you feel hungry and you say, I'm hungry and my energy's low. I'm going to have coffee. And you have coffee and it feels like your energy's increased, but you're just being stimulated. And now your appetite is being suppressed because of the caffeine and because of the coffee. And so for a lot of folks, it's hindering the ability to have that communication with your body. It's kind of hindering and impacting your ability to tune into your body and to get those cues. There's something kind of blunting that. I'm not anti-coffee. I love coffee. However, for my clients who are struggling with this stuff, I do recommend that the first coffee of the day comes with the first meal or after. And that if you're hungry, to eat, because coffee is not a meal. Coffee is not breakfast. Coffee is not a snack. Coffee is not a lunch. Coffee is coffee, and coffee is awesome, but it cannot provide us with fuel. So I think if you're noticing that if it's your go-to because you need energy, it's really important to honor that it's not giving you energy. It's stimulating you, but it's not providing energy in the form of nutrients and calories for your body, for your cells. So this is where all of this is important to be intentional about our eating, right? So if we can implement more mindfulness, more self-awareness, more kindness to ourselves, I think that's often missed in this process. I think all of this is the most important steps that we can take. Before I dive into the Q&A, and again, feel free to post up questions as I'm wrapping this up, I just want to share a few additional considerations for you if you find yourself struggling with chaotic eating. So what are some considerations for chaotic eating? That slide went with the last thing I was saying, and I forgot to change it. So if you're recognizing that chaotic eating may be something that's impacting you, that is affecting your day to day, let's talk about some things that you can do here, especially if chaotic eating is impacting your relationship with food. Let's just kind of talk about some steps you can take towards just more positive change in your life and in your eating habits. So first and foremost, it's making sure to check in and ask yourself really critical questions. I think it would be really easy for me to stand here and say, okay, step 1, eat every 3 to 5 hours. I mean, yes, maybe that is going to be something you have to start with. However, I think most importantly is to kind of peel back the layers a little bit, start a little bit sooner in the process and start to ask ourselves some really critical questions. Ask yourself first, are the rules and expectations you've set for yourself unattainable and unsustainable? So if you're expecting, hey, my version of consistency with my eating and what I would like to be doing, you're never actually able to do. And so as a result of not being able to eat in this way that you envision as being the perfect way for you or the most effective or optimal way, if it feels super unapproachable or unattainable, you're probably not going to do it. And you may just fall back on just this chaotic space where there is no structure, there are no guidelines. So step back and align with what is realistic for you and the things on the most micro level, the most tolerable level that will make a significant difference for you. I encourage you, if you're sort of feeling like this might be something you're struggling with, head back to the broadcast we did a few weeks back. It might be a month ago now. We talked all about asking ourselves a really important, a really critical nutrition question. And that question is, am I truly ready, able, and willing to do this thing, whatever it is you're intending to do with your nutrition? It is really possible that you are expecting too much of yourself. And what you are viewing as consistency and achievable or optimal for your health and your nutrition, or the ways in which you're attempting to be consistent, are just impossible for you right now. And with that, you end up creating total chaos. So meet yourself where you are. That is the most important thing that you can do. And it's really critical and crucial that we touch on the psychological toll of harboring unrealistic expectations for ourselves. All of this takes a really heavy toll in our well-being. I don't know how many of you here have ever experienced that, where you set yourself these really high expectations, high goals of what you need to do with your nutrition, and you're consistently falling short. That starts to wear on us, right? That wears on us psychologically. We start to feel guilt. We start to feel frustration. We start to feel a sense of failure or feelings of not being good enough. And then we take on those narratives, we take on those identities, we take on those stories, and they become so intertwined with our own eating habits that this is perpetuating this cycle of chaotic eating. Because one day I'll starting tomorrow, I'm going to do it again. And we try it again tomorrow. And it's so far beyond what we're capable of doing. It's so far outside of, am I ready, able, and willing, that again, we just kind of set ourselves up for failure. So acknowledging and addressing that these expectations we have for ourselves are a pivotal step for breaking free from this pattern and nurturing just a healthier relationship with food. I think that's a really important question to ask ourselves. What am I expecting of myself? And is it attainable? Are you neglecting your nourishment? We've already talked about this a bunch on this broadcast, but ask yourself, am I neglecting my nourishment during the day? And is that leading to a cycle of attempting to compensate later? So if this is a weekly occurrence, as I talked about, you might be caught in this restriction and binging cycle, or what I call getting a case of the fuck-its on the weekend, when during the week you're like, I can do this. And it's all this white knuckling of restriction. And again, things that are really not aligned for where you're at right now. And the weekend comes and you get the fuck-its and you just say, never mind. And then you might be wondering why, despite all your hard work, you're just not seeing any results with your health. This is that restriction binge cycle you've probably heard about before. It's resulting from physiological and psychological factors. So when we don't provide our body with adequate nourishment consistently, our hunger and our cravings often intensify. And then the mental strain of that restriction combined with that physiological response can trigger overeating. And for some people, it can lead to binge eating. Psychologically, why restriction is so problematic and just so challenging for us, it starts to make certain foods even more appealing because there's this sense of scarcity. They're off limits. I'm not allowed to. I can't have. Suddenly, we want more and more, and we're sort of setting the stage. We're setting ourselves up for this sort of restrict binge cycle. Again, guilt and shame, all of this perpetuates the cycle again. So it's important to recognize triggers for you and empower yourself to kind of interrupt that cycle, whatever that is. And we'll talk a little bit about what that is. And then I have lots of resources and options for you to start to address transforming your relationship with food and just making more intentional choices, not implementing arbitrary restrictions, so that you can have more balanced and just more sustainable eating habits for you. It's asking yourself, is it possible that you have total at this time, just a lack of clarity in what your current goals and your personal core values are. So a lot of times when we don't know what our goals are, we don't have any clarifiable goals, we're not working towards something specific, or we're not even clear on what our what our personal core values are, it starts to leave us uncertain about what eating choices align for us. And we just start to either follow other people, follow arbitrary rules, guess, throw it all away. So when we clarify our why and our own personal desires, that can help to guide us towards a better understanding of what consistency means for us. And I think it's important to recognize that this can change with seasons of life, right? Our goals change, our lives change. So I talk a lot about seeing consistency as this dial or a spectrum versus an on-off switch, and making sure that you clarify upper and lower bounds with your goals and with your habits to get us out of that all or nothing sort of thinking with all of this. I always say it's better to do something, just one small something, than trying to do all or nothing. Anyone here experience that kind of all or nothing cycle, and maybe not really being clear on what their version of consistency is? And so that lack of clarity is maybe leaving you feeling a little confused. If you are joining us on Instagram, I'm seeing folks kind of come and go. I'm also live on YouTube, which is where we have a chat, and we also have some slides of what we're covering. We've talked about this a lot tonight, so I'll keep this one super simple, but establishing a regular eating schedule, and this is really important. Could establishing some sort of regular routine and schedule help you? Sometimes practicing this routine can help guide your brain and your body back to being able to better tune in and recognize your hunger cues. And many of my clients, I've spoken about this before, but many of my clients have explored setting a schedule and just prioritizing the consistency aspect for a few weeks. And that helps to bring their hunger and fullness cues back online, as I like to say. And then lastly, for some things that you can kind of work on, I think this goes without saying, but then I see loads of food and mood journals from new potential clients. And I think that as easy as it is to say we know that this is what we should be doing, there's often a million reasons why we're not. And that's asking yourself, are my meals actually balanced and satisfying? If you are not getting adequate protein and fiber and your meals lack balance, if the majority of your calories are coming from ultra-processed foods, I'm not saying avoid all processed foods, but ultra-processed foods do impact hunger and fullness and satiety cues, and may impact the balance at our meals and the balance of our calories and our macronutrients. If your meals are low in volume, the way you are choosing to eat may not be keeping you satisfied and satiated. And so this can lead us to that desire to just graze, to always be on the hunt for snacks, to never feel satisfied. And it can also result in an uncertainty about how to even approach your meals or how to sort of create balance at mealtime if you're just constantly struggling to feel satisfied. And so to kind of wrap this up, this is where if you are struggling on some of these aspects of determining how to find balance for you and finding that consistency, this is where seeking guidance, maybe it is a need for more information, for more knowledge, for support, for accountability. All of this can help to make a significant difference. And, I offer a lot of different, I may not be the right person for you. You may have someone else that will support you in this. If the work that I do speaks to you, this is what my one-on-one coaching package do. I have a range of programs available. And then I also have, those of you who are here with me, I have tons of free resources between my Instagram, my email newsletter list, as well as various resources on my website that are all designed to provide you with the information needed to help you foster the confidence to create meals that nourish both your body and your satisfaction. So when you start to learn the art of balanced and intentional nutrition, and whatever that is for you, this is how we begin to kind of cultivate a deeper understanding of how to build meals that are going to sustain us so that we aren't dealing with that sort of erratic, chaotic eating throughout the day where we never feel satisfied or we go long stretches without food, without any intentionality. And all of this is about so much more than the nutrients in our food. It's about embracing nourishment through our pleasure, through the pleasure that we get from our meals, and just an overall holistic approach to our nutrition that considers everything, inside and out. So I'd love to hear if anyone has any questions about chaotic eating, or if you're struggling with something specific that you would like guidance or support on. But just know that all of the stuff that we talked about on this broadcast tonight, these are just some starting point recommendations and just opportunities for you to reflect and just to start to address some of these chaotic eating patterns, to maybe ask some of these deeper questions, to dig into maybe where the disruption lies for you, and to just start to create more of a positive relationship with food for you. Any questions? I do have a couple questions from folks that couldn't be on the live that were looking for support. And before I get to those, I'd love to hear if anybody has any specific questions about chaotic eating, about some of the things that we discussed tonight. And thanks for everyone who shared over on YouTube about some of the things you're experiencing. I would love to check in and hear if you need anything in this arena. I think a common question, and maybe anyone on this live, if you're experiencing this, you can let me know. But a couple of folks said, all of this is great, but what if I'm not hungry? Like, what if I know I need to eat and I'm struggling with chaotic eating and being consistent, but I'm never hungry? And this is where I will say, if this is something that you struggle with, if you're not hungry, it's important first to understand that you still do need to eat. This is how your body thrives. This is how your body gets energy. This is how you have the fuel to get through the days and to live up to all the demands you're placing on your body. I actually just posted a blog on my website, a blog article all about this. So things to consider: it might be leaning on more hyper-palatable, calorie-dense foods for a little bit until your body kind of picks up the communication from your brain and from your body, until you start to reconnect, with those signals. It's important to know that for most situations, not all, there's all types of things that can impact why we're not hungry or why we're struggling to tune in. But for a lot of us, hunger often comes back when we start to practice more of that consistency. And this sometimes means planning ahead and making it easy, picking foods that no matter what is going on in your life, you can eat. Something I talk a lot about with my clients is coming up with what I call like contingency plans or emergency foods or oh shit foods for the days that you're like, I can't eat, I'm not hungry, my appetite's low, but I know I need to eat. Beth said being consistent is so important. I don't want my blood sugar to drop. I want to feel good tomorrow. This is my oh shit food, and have those things around. I also talked in the last episode that came out last Wednesday of the Between Meals podcast. We talked all about how to tune in to our body if you are struggling with hunger and fullness cues, if you are struggling with that communication from your body. So you might consider listening to that if hunger is low for you, if appetite is low, if you're missing maybe some of the signals from your body. Another question that came in was, is it normal to have occasional days of irregular eating? And I would say yes. As I touched on earlier in this broadcast, we are dynamic beings. Our days are different. Our environments are different. Our stress levels, our hormones, all of these things change. Sometimes irregular eating is going to happen. So consistency isn't about perfection. It isn't about eating the exact same way, the same amount of calories, the same amount of protein. It is going to change. Our needs are going to change, and giving yourself the space and grace to honor that and accept that and to not judge it, I think, is incredibly important. Any other questions as we're wrapping up tonight's broadcast? I'd be happy to answer anything that anyone's asking. Another question came in about, how do I distinguish between actual hunger and emotional cravings? I actually did a full Instagram post about this. So again, I talked through and shared the differences and some of the things to look for to clarify and identify emotional hunger versus physical cravings, and hunger versus emotional cravings. So I'll make sure to link that up in the show notes so that you can find that on my Instagram and learn a little bit more. It can take a little bit of time, and sometimes there's some crossover gray area with this stuff. Brian said, what advice to give someone who may have achieved their weight goals and are making record progress in the health and wellness, but still feels like it's never enough? Oh, and still feels super insecure. I mean, that is a very tough one to answer without knowing a whole lot more about the person. That's a really great question. And I will say it is incredibly common, especially when you do achieve some of this stuff rather quickly. And depending on the intentions behind those goals, I would say it's probably something to potentially work on with a counselor, with a nutritional therapist, with a dietitian, with a therapist, if you have the accessibility and the opportunity to do that. But I would say it's a really good opportunity to ask yourself if changing your body further is going to make you happier, or if, achieving some version of your body will change how you perceive yourself. And if you're putting much of your worth and your belief in yourself, in your physical shape and size, that might be something to sit with and dig into. I think it's the challenging part and I've struggled with this at points along my journey, is it does often feel like it's never enough, or there's always something more. And I think sometimes what's happening is we get caught into this loop of self-improvement and this fix-it loop. And sometimes we just need to pause and celebrate and honor and acknowledge all of the growth we have achieved and all of the successes we've achieved, the big ones, the small ones, and not instantly jump into feeling like we have to fix and change and do more and more. And it's just giving yourself the space to say, before I lost weight, I was good enough and I was lovable and I was enough and I was worthy. And I'm the same person now, I just exist in a smaller body. And I think it's giving yourself the space to sit with that. But I think I'd have to know a whole lot more about an individual to give very specific advice on that. But I think it's actually pausing in the progress, as you said, if someone's making record progress, it might just be that it's been like achievement after achievement after achievement, or a destination after destination after destination, and not actually pausing and looking back at the journey and, like I said, giving credit for and acknowledging and celebrating where you've come from. But that's a great question. Thanks so much for asking that, Brian. And I don't know if I gave you a good enough answer. I just feel like I was talking. Any other questions? The last question that came in was any resources or tools that I can recommend to help establish more consistent and sustainable eating patterns. And absolutely, that's where the work that I spoke about previously that I offer both in my one-on-one coaching programs, which I have all types of varying levels and offerings and time together. Empowered Nourishment, which is my self-guided Nutrition Foundations program. That's one if you want instant access. We talk all about consistency, meal timing and frequency, hunger and fullness cues, appetite, how to know how much is right for you, talking about our macro balance and just all of the deeper mindset work, values, core values, all of this behavior change stuff. Trust and Thrive Academy is my small group coaching program. We start again in September. So if you're interested in working in a small community of like-minded individuals, we have the waitlist now open. If you put your name on the waitlist, you'll be the first to be notified when the doors open. You're welcome, Brian. I'm glad it helped. Thanks so much for asking that. I really appreciate all of you being here. If you use the show notes in YouTube, if you use below, you will find all of the resources I mentioned, including that free ebook, including the podcast episode I mentioned, the blog post I just wrote this week. If you enjoyed this broadcast, I really encourage you to subscribe, to like the video, to leave a comment on the video. That helps me a ton, especially if you'd like to see more of these. Please share it with folks that you think might like it too. And if you want to dig deeper into your health, I do have a weekly email newsletter called Just a Taste. We send it out every Sunday with weekly teachings. And again, you're the first to be notified about all types of new things we have coming. I appreciate all of you being here. Thank you so much. I hope you learned something. I know it was a lot of information, but again, I think diving into this concept of chaotic eating, acknowledging when we're struggling with chaotic eating and just the ways that it can impact us, and maybe some of the things we can do to begin to remedy it, to change it, to improve it, to be more consistent, whatever that means for us, I think is a really critical piece, whatever your personal health goals are. You're so welcome, Carrie. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. We'll be here next Wednesday, same time, same place. Got some other fun stuff coming ahead for you all. So I appreciate you all, and have a good one. Take care of yourselves. Be well.